Hello everyone. Today we have with us Deepika Chetri, all the way from Northeast. Deepika is a writer and development professional. A year ago, she moved to Northeast India as a calling. She has worked on different thematic areas: West management, community mobilization, developing alternative livelihoods, and developing rural enterprises. She believes in stories for change. Her earlier writings have been published in TOI, IDR, ECO and E, India Water Portal, and Homegrown. Her poem Roots will be published by Zuban as part of its Assam anthology. She has a master's degree in development from Azim Premji University, Bangalore, and a bachelor's in English literature from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, Delhi. So, welcome Deepika to our podcast.
Thank you, Pankaj. Thank you so much for having me in the podcast. And I'm really happy to be here and answer your questions.
So, Deepika, we are, as you know, that this podcast is a special podcast, and we are looking for stories from all the sort of unheard, areas of India where people are working, having a great impact on the lives of other people by doing their work. But we are also looking for areas, domains wherein we don't have much data, we don't have many stories with. So I guess this podcast is going to be very special for all our audience, and we will definitely get to know a lot about your work and the area you're working in. So I will start with some questions so that we have our conversation starting. So Deepika, you are a development professional. So what do you mean by that development professional? What are things that really captures?
First of all, thank you again, Pankaj, for having me on this podcast. And um, so, when uh, um, to begin with my master's in development, okay, I'll start from there. The This is not a short answer, so I'm also taking time.
No
So
problem.
basically, I had my master's in development from Azim Premji, right? Like you also said, and then um, so in that program, the first thing that we do in class when we join during our orientation is our professors facilitate this question, this philosophical question, as I would like to call it, and they begin by asking this question: development for whom? And a lot of people, as I was enrolled in that course and I was talking to people outside of my university, a lot of other people would also ask me this question: you study
Mhm.
development, but development for whom? So
Yes.
in coming back to the class and the discussion, so we would discuss and debate and then finally arrive at this, which is that at the core of India's, or for that matter any country's development, is the socio-economic development of every citizen. um,
Mhm.
um, and also enshrined in our constitution is that we have this imperative to safeguard the rights of minorities and the marginalized, including the environment. So
Mhm.
as a professional who has studied development, I
Mhm.
work for the empowerment vis-a-vis development of the most marginalized sections of our society, and the section of society that the government has not been able to reach for various reasons. And
Right.
in that, when I say development professional, it is wide in its scope, perspective, and also opportunity. For example, some of us work with businesses heading or leading their CSRs. Some of us, my batchmates, would be working with governments with in trying to take their schemes to reach the most marginalized of the communities who need those. And some of us, like me for example, will work with NGOs. Some others will work with media houses and or in academia, for example. So when I say development professional, that working for the community, the most marginalized, is, I believe, at the core of it.
I see. I see. That's fascinating. So, was it something you always wanted to do, or it just happened to you?
Again, very, very interesting question. And Again, it's not a straightforward answer. So, as you also read out
Yeah.
and introduced me,
Mm-hmm.
um, I did my bachelor's in English literature in 2015, and by the third year, I was working with this NGO, and that I think is the initial days when I started to realize that I was interested in this sector. So working in this NGO just happened; it was not planned. So this was an NGO that was started by IIT Delhi students, and then it spread across different colleges within Delhi University. And I also started working with them as a voluntary student. And so that wasn't planned. And when I started working with them, I liked it, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt competent. And in that work, I felt at peace. I saw myself as continuing to do such work. And
Okay.
this could also, again, I connect my reason to maybe taking up development studies or working in this domain. I connected back to my father,
Mm-hmm.
who I have seen as I grew up. I saw him working with communities, um, and constantly on the field. And I would see it some days, local people would visit our home with this local chicken, holding the chicken by the feet as a way of basically thanking him in a very traditional, miso traditional way of thanking somebody. So I grew up in that environment. Then I worked with this NGO. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I was also interested in writing as I did English literature. So, as luck would have it, I started working as a writer and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So, for 2 years, I worked as a writer in advertising. But slowly, as the high of that creative process started to wane, Pankaj, I realized in about 2 years that there was so much still in India that I didn't know. I didn't know the Northeast that I belonged to. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
the history, the culture, and I didn't know a lot about the politics, the socio-cultural milieu that we were in. So I wanted to study, and I by now I knew that I wanted to study a multidisciplinary course. And by then I also knew that I wanted to work at the grassroots with the communities, because working as a writer, it felt like I was working in a glass chamber, which was true in a literal sense. We had glass walls and I was typing on my laptop inside that
Yeah.
glass chamber. So I wanted to work with the community. So like I started looking out for courses, and I found this development course very fascinating, and I admired Azim Premji's work,
Mm-hmm.
Azim Premji sir, and then his commitment to education and the institution that he envisioned, where I made my first Dalit friends in the university, and that was where my learning actually began. So that is how it started. Yeah.
Oh. So it's more like a journey rather than just like
Yeah.
one point where you thought
Yeah.
that you should do this, right? That's
Yes,
what I.
I think the dots connected somewhere. The reasons, and in hindsight, I think the reasons were there. But yeah, like you rightly said, it was more of a journey.
Great, great, interesting. So you have been mentioning that you have started working with communities. So can you sum up your experience working with tribal communities? Uh, like how easy or difficult was it to connect with the communities in the first place? What was your experience like?
Okay. So, Pankaj, I worked with the Bhil community in MP very briefly, and the Karbis in Karbi Anglong Kaziranga landscape in Assam. So, for this conversation, I will focus more on my experience working with the Karbis in the
Mhm,
Assam landscape, mostly because I spent more time there, and I had, according to me, I had an eye-opening experience because I learned a lot about their culture, their practices, their motivations,
mhm,
their connections. So until then, I had studied traditional knowledge system. I had studied traditional knowledge as a possible sustainable solution
mhm,
um, to our relation with the environment. But it was here that I actually saw how people connected, what was changing, and what we can do. So the first. I'll come to the challenges. I think firstly, my major challenge, but before that, I also like to say that I had a resolve. I knew that I would find difficulties and challenges, but I was
Right.
committed to the work, and I knew that this was where I wanted to be.
Mm.
But as I had predicted, my first challenge, and I think the most challenging, was language. So I didn't speak Karbi, and Assamese I could still understand a little bit because uh, um, I understood Bengali. So from there I understood bits and pieces of Assamese, but even that not so much. And then Karbi was like absolutely a new language, not even a word I could understand. So that was a huge challenge in terms of trying to connect with the people. But um, but it took resolve, it took patience from my side to overcome that. And then I believe that where language feels, your genuineness comes out through your effort, and you start speaking with your eyes, your hands, basically your body language shows how genuine you are, and then people are receptive of that. They know and they can understand who is genuine and who is interested, who is there for their benefit, or they can make out who has come for their own benefit or who has come to actually work for them. And I was genuinely interested in learning from them and doing my best
Mhm.
in my capacity to do good by them. So
I
I
see.
believe that I was able to connect at a very human level, and not to miss out. I feel that I was this person, and they knew I was this person who spoke Hindi, who came from
Mhm.
Delhi, and there must have been power dynamic given
Right.
the fact that I represented an organization. But
Right.
I've seen instances where I feel like I've been able to go beyond that. After a point, I would like to believe that I was able to move beyond that, because, like, for example, when I left the organization, um, my colleague called me up, and she said, this person, so this community member was
Mhm.
asking about you. And then she re-quoted him and said that unse baat karna acha lagta hai. So for me,
Oh,
that's an achievement. And in
yeah.
spite of class, gender, religious differences, we were able to connect.
Right.
So, and if I mean, can I add a little more?
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. So this was my experience at an individual, and my challenges at a very individual level.
Mhm.
From I would also like to speak from an institutional perspective,
Yeah.
where I think the institutional challenge that, as an organization or as a person, that I
Mm.
perceived was that the local institution, given where I was working was a sixth schedule area, the local institutions were weak. And then there is the Sarkari Gaon Bura system that was installed by the government, who
Oh,
had their own political agendas. And to them, as I saw it, to them, our work was a testament of their failure. So,
right. Mm.
and this was in spite of the fact that a major component of our project was strengthening the village institution, and we tried very hard to work closely with them, in collaboration with them, always keeping them updated, or trying to collaborate, basically.
Right. Right.
But I see, especially in terms of community forest management, I see the local institutions weakening as a major problem or challenge. And
Mm.
again, at a further macro level, my observation is that there is a dissonance between environmental organizations with their objectives and what people are fundamentally asking for, what communities are demanding or asking for from either the government or an organization who comes to that place to work for the
Yes.
people or for forest conservation. For example, I wouldn't take any example of a particular organization, but for example,
Mhm.
an environmental project can be very participatory in designing, for example, an eco restoration or a resource management project. But
Right.
if the community, for example, wants better education, that is their dire need, that is what they're asking for, better education for their children. um, and that and then they're working hard or toiling to get their kids to better schools, which are
Mm-hmm.
usually boarding schools, which I saw, and they're working in rooms. They're working as casual laborers, seasonal migrants, to get
I
them
see.
to these boarding schools, English medium schools. And
Oh,
if, as an organization, in spite of whether it's an environmental organization or not, if we're not able to address these needs of the people, then I
mhm.
feel that any environmental project is bound to fail. And for it to succeed, I believe that the social and the environmental within the project and commitment needs to come. Yeah.
I
So
see. I see.
I'm sorry
So
for the lengthy one, but I couldn't help bring in all those perspectives.
no, the lengthy ones are good because that gives you so much about what you experienced there. But I I do believe that all these different bodies that participate in environmental conservation maybe have their own agendas and objectives, and sometimes it does not match, does not overlap, and that's where the conflicts would start.
Mm,
I guess I guess that's a very genuine observation that you have. So, since you were talking about participatory model of conservation and how the villagers perhaps would have a different priority at that particular time shot, and the organizations who are working out there, perhaps they should realize what are the priorities of the communities, and they
mm,
should work towards it. So, with that, let me also ask this next question, which is about ecotourism. So we all know that Assam is a tourism hotspot, right?
yeah.
And we just want to know how this ecotourism scenario is faring in Assam. How is your experience about the entire ecotourism model which is implemented in Assam?
Okay. So I'll try and break this down. Okay.
Okay.
So, firstly, I'll try and look it from how um, I'll come to Kaziranga, which is the a tourist hotspot, and
Mhm.
it also has the highest footfall in Northeast, tourist footfall in Northeast. But I would like to look at this question from a state perspective first. Okay. So. Um, Tourism, first of all, is growing in Northeast, and for example, if we look at social media reels, we see people talking about unseen places in Northeast, and the government also seems to be harping, taking from there and trying to build their own state-wise tourism plans. Now, um, especially in Assam, when we look at tourism, there was a 2017 tourism policy that this was at a time when the current chief minister Hemant Biswa Sharma was the minister of tourism department, and he envisioned to build Assam tourism on the back of wildlife and wilderness tourism, which continues to which continues even today. For
Right.
example, the G20
Yeah.
Northeast tourism proposal for
Mhm.
investors also had the same rhetoric, which is that we will create um, wildlife tourism, nature based tourism. So, all of these are language of ecotourism. And
Right.
ecotourism across the world is growing as an alternative tourism, it,
Mhm.
where it is more empathetic, I would say, and more conscious as
Mhm.
consumers and also as travelers or producers of um, tourism products.
I see.
And
Yeah.
the Assam government is harping on that.
Mhm.
And for example, they have also come up with the Amar Alohi scheme. And I believe all of these are um, green tourism, Amar Alohi scheme, which is promoting rural homestays. All of these are positive steps if we look
Mhm.
at from an economic perspective, and also for the locals who will benefit from it. But there is also a caveat to that, which is if we look at, I feel like the state government, what it's doing is that it's borrowing the language of ecotourism and using it to promote mass tourism. And I will just give a small example, which is I will now take you to Kaziranga. I'll just give you one example where this is a personal observation,
Mhm.
where like I said, Kaziranga has the highest footfall when it comes to tourism, and
Yeah.
Kaziranga is known for its wildlife and nature-based tourism. And if you go, there are four ranges in Kaziranga, and there is a central range which goes past the Kohara market. And the Kohara market, the name comes from the Kohara River. So
Oh,
if we just go till the gate of the central range, you will see single-use plastics everywhere. There is
oh,
no collection system in Kaziranga. In fact, in Assam, there's only 3% door-to-door collection. This is according to the 2024 the Swachh Sarvekshan survey report, I believe. And the entire stretch of the Kohara River under the bridge, if you look, there's heavily polluted. Solid waste is being thrown there, and the water is also polluted. And according to the SPCB report, that I had read when I had joined Aranyak at that point, I wanted to see the state of the river because I saw the water quality and the poor state of solid waste management. So the
mhm.
water quality in that, I think, 2-3 kilometer stretch has low oxygen, dissolved
Oh,
oxygen, and is extremely polluted. Even if you just look at it, you know it's polluted. It's dark in color, and there is solid waste, like I said, which is thrown all
uh-huh.
around.
Yeah.
I had assisted in water quality testing, and we had found a high nitrate and phosphorus concentration again. So
Oh,
directly from the hotels,
mm,
the liquid waste was being dumped into the Kohara River, which goes and meets the Brahmaputra River, which is the main water source for the animals. And
mm,
like we all know, during floods, so
mm.
before that, like I said, that there is no collection system in
Yeah.
Kaziranga or in Assam. So in Kaziranga, if we look at during floods, there is the river swells, and then all the waste that has been collected anywhere is going to directly go into the park.
Yeah.
And I have not seen any project or any attempt from the administration or the board of Kaziranga National Park in clearing those dump out. And from a baseline survey that was done by an organization where the authorities were quoted or were seen
Mhm.
saying that the waste management has directly impacted the animals inside the park. So
I
all
see.
of
I
this
see.
rhetoric of ecotourism, I from at least the state level and the administration level, I don't know um, uh, how feasible or sustainable it is going to be.
Wow, that's a lot of
Yeah,
inside
that's a
information.
lot of information.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see a lot of ecotourism in the truest sense happening where in Assam or anywhere else that I have been to.
Well, I have similar observations. I mean, what you're saying, I guess, more or less similar practices are all across India and different parts of India. Not just that, but ecotourism, I think, is pretty hyped. I guess this particular term. I really think that we still need to understand what is ecotourism and work towards it. So what you are saying, I guess, it's something similar situation everywhere.
Mm. And can I just quickly add something? So,
Yeah.
another aspect of ecotourism, one we spoke from a state perspective, the other
Mhm.
perspective is from a consumer perspective, right?
Yeah.
So, at from my experience, so we also run something used when I was a part of Aranyag in Kaziranga. We used
Mhm.
to run this ecotourism initiative called Journey for Learning, and there we hosted people in our community homestays, and
Mhm.
we would take them for forest walks, for example, or river walks. So I'll just give one insight, and what I'm basically trying to say is that in terms of ecotourism and consumer choice, we are
Mhm.
at a learning stage, I believe, where we are open to new experiences, but we also want the comfort of hotels. For
Yeah.
example, like we had this French family from Bangalore who had come, And at around 10 at night, the next morning we had the walk at 7. Around 10 at night, I was talking to the wife, the mother, and
Okay.
she said, "Can you bring gloves and like a plastic bag? We would like to do a cleanup drive on the way."
Oh.
So now our forest does not have litter,
Mm.
but then I mean, I was happy to accommodate. And in that process, I realized that these are a little more conscious
Yeah.
consumers of tourism or tourists. Right.
Mm.
But on the other hand, very interestingly or ironically, the same family chose not to stay with our homestays, which would have been less carbon footprint. And they chose to stay in hotels because
Yes.
they wanted that comfort. So our if they had stayed with our homestays, it would have been lesser carbon footprint as well as economically benefited our communities, which is also at the core principle of ecotourism. So there's that openness to exploring,
Mm.
but there is also that need for comfort,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
where we defeat the purpose, I believe.
I will just quote here, my life, my rules. So, so Deepika, this conversation is going, a great deal. So many things that we learned from you. When I was, reading some of the articles that you shared,
Hmm.
I was really, stunned. So I will just read out the names of some of the articles that you have shared.
Okay.
Manipuri Muslims of Kachar, the
Yeah.
Lulu, Conserve Stories, Stories Conserve. Very interesting, tagline. I really like this. What is after successful radio campaign?
Hmm.
So, I mean, you have written on such a diverse topics.
Yeah.
I feel like you are a prolific writer. So, where does this come from? Can you narrate a story from the field or something you felt by heart, something that made you think of your life when you write? Can you narrate any such stories?
Um, okay, I'm not sure if I can on the spot narrate anything that made me think of my life, but if I think back, one of my most cherished memories, and that
Mm-hmm.
gives me hope basically from my field work in the Karbi Anglong Kaziranga landscape. There is this one story that I would like to narrate. I also thankfully made a video on the spot, and I still have that video, and I cherish it very much. And that is, like I earlier said, this was a journey for learning, and we had a recce, and
Mm-hmm.
we were going to have guests coming, and so I accompanied our tour guides. So Sanjit Da and Rongfar Da, as I call them, Sanjit Bey and Mongol Singh Rongfar.
Mm-hmm.
And these are our traditional knowledge keepers, and they are also the our main lead guides who guide tourists, and um, they speak multiple languages, so we don't need to translate, and that makes us even more happy because they can directly interact with tourists or anybody who comes in. So we
Yeah.
had gone for a recce, and we were exploring a new path,
Mm-hmm.
and this was at a time when I had seen, I probably been 6 7 months into working here, and I realized how much, like I said, institution was weakening. There was this need from the people for modern education, like all of
Yeah.
us. And
Yeah.
slowly, I could see that there were very few traditional knowledge keepers left, at least in that landscape. And
Mm.
for me, that was a very scary thing to see,
Mm.
because so far I had learned of traditional knowledge systems as this savior or savior to a more sustainable world. And here I was seeing it deteriorating in a very weak position, and I didn't know if, even if we wanted to document and rekindle that love for one's tradition or traditional knowledge, I don't know if the people wanted that. So I was in this very in this mindset. I was thinking of these things, and on this particular day we had gone for a recce,
Mm-hmm.
and Dhaniram Rongfarda was with us, and we crossed this. We had crossed a few Joom fields, and then we entered this patch where there was a stream on the right and a fountain on top, and there was this huge rock, and
Mm.
with mosses covering it. And
Mhm.
there was this particular wild edible that I later learned, and
Okay.
that was growing on the rock, and it had leaves. And
Okay.
as soon as I was behind and Rongfarda was in front of me,
Mhm.
and as soon as Rongfarda saw it, he began plucking the leaves. And
Mm.
in that moment, that's where I said I still have that video. I started recording,
Mhm.
and so he was plucking the leaves, and at the end, he left 2 3 leaves, and I was fascinated by this. And
Mm.
I somewhere knew the reason, but I still wanted to nudge. I wanted
Mm.
to hear from him, and I nudged him with a question. I said, Rangfarda, why don't you pluck the rest of the leaves? Very
Mm.
innocently, I said, why don't you pluck the rest of the leaves? इतने से कितना खाना बनेगा? नहीं बनेगा. It was just one, um, probably about 12 leaves that were growing on that particular stem. And I nudged him with that question, and very innocently again he replied saying कि थोड़ा सा छोड़ेंगे तो और निकल के आएगा.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So that
Great.
made me really happy, and in that moment I felt that if this practice continues of this knowledge, I
Mm.
don't know if this was his traditional knowledge speaking, or the fact that he has been working with Aranyak for
Yeah.
probably 3 4 years, so this was the institutional knowledge seeping into him. But whatever
Mm.
it was, whether it was a combination of both,
It was
this
what.
this knowledge that continues for me, that gave me hope of leaving some for the renewal of the rest. So
Yes.
that gave me hope. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that is one of my most cherished memories and stories. Yeah.
That's a great experience to witness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Sustainable
I
harvesting.
Yeah, sustainable harvesting. Yeah. Conservation practice every day.
Yeah, I have experienced this with, especially with the tribal communities. They have a very good sense of how much to get.
Hmm.
They don't exploit. They never
Hmm.
exploit.
Hmm.
I think they know, what's going to happen in the future.
Hmm.
So with
Never.
that,
Sorry. I just like to come in with. Um, so when we say never is where I think the issue I find is because never means there's a definite, but with the changing, because change is going to keep happening. We don't know what they would want next, or what they are also human like us. They also have aspirations. So that never, I don't. So never was something that I thought.
Mhm.
Before I went to the field. But exploitation to a certain extent, or to a large extent, is also something that I saw on the field, even with tribal communities. And that is where I feel like when we say never, we create this narrative of,
Right.
I think, a fantasy that we create for maybe students or people who've not been to the field. So at least today I'm a little careful with the choice of words that I use.
Very well said.
Yeah.
So I think they have got their own good influencers to convert them.
Hmm.
So with that, I'll come to the last question, and I think this is a pretty broad question. So with whatever is happening, around you, around us, are you still optimistic about the future of conservation in India? And what message, if any, would you like to share with the budding, female students, especially wanting to become a conservation researcher?
Hmm. Um, I am optimist always, and I am optimistic for this as well. I think there was a recent survey. I don't know if this was a individual or an organization who did this survey, and um, they asked. I think the question was around. what kind of work would you prefer in conservation? And a lot of the majority of the answer was conservation researcher. And
Mhm.
so I think these are small examples where I see hope that there is a growing interest among the student community or the youth to pursue this field. And I hope that we would not be so late by the time that they take up the mantle or they take charge. I believe that we would still have forests, ample forests, and places like
Mm.
those, like what we have in the Northeast,
Yeah.
in the Western Ghats. So I am hopeful, and I think it's a great space to work, especially for people who love being around nature. And I think nature allows you that space that urban spaces or urban jungle doesn't allow you. And it's a space where you can relax, you can find yourself in a very cliched way, but um, I think it has ample opportunity. And the forest is never casteist or classist, or it does not discriminate on
Yes.
gender. And you might not find a, hygienic toilet in an urban Mumbai or Delhi, but then the forest is free, and then it's not. You have ample space, and I think it it's just a beautiful place to be. I don't know how else to put it, but for me, it's home. And I've grown up around it, and I would like to continue being around it. And I believe the youth of today also feel the same. The reason why a lot of people travel,
Yeah.
apart from putting it on Instagram, I believe that they get some sense of freedom, relaxation, respite from the struggles and the rat chase of the world.
Mm.
And I see hope there, that just for that very even selfish purpose, we will continue to preserve and conserve.
That's 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 really a great answer, Deepika. And thank you for being with us. It was a wonderful talk, wonderful conversation with you.
I
So
had a
thank you,
wonderful time. Thank you so much. And
thank you, Deepika. Thank you once again.
thank you. Bye bye.